Released on July 21st, 1981, Escape from New York is the fifth theatrical feature film from a true American original, director John Carpenter. He began his career with a 45-minute short film at USC that was expanded to feature-length and released in theaters. Dark Star was notable not just for Carpenter, but also for its star and writer, Dan O'Bannon, who would go on to create one of the most enduring villains of modern cinema, the Alien. Set in the far-flung future of 1997, Escape from New York tells the tale of the new police state that is America, still embroiled in a decades-old conflict with the Soviet Union and China. The nation's solution to the exponential rise in domestic crime is to create one maximum security prison for the entire country, the island of Manhattan. This information is disseminated through a spectacular animated opening sequence featuring a familiar voice.
The rules are simple. Once you go in, you don't come out.
That's Jamie Lee Curtis, a familiar face for Carpenter's fans, having starred in his two previous films, The Fog, and her introductory role as Laurie Strode in his classic, Halloween. As the US president races to a summit meeting to potentially end the war, his plane is commandeered by terrorists and crashed into New York Maximum Security Penitentiary. When it becomes clear that even the might of the United States police force can't extricate him from the inmates inside, the responsibility for rescuing him falls on the shoulders of the prison's warden, Bob Houck. That's Lee Van Cleef. He was a mainstay of the spaghetti western, having played Angel Eyes, the bad, in Sergio Leone's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, as well as the title character in an absolutely thrilling series of films about a wandering gunslinger and sometimes circus performer named Sabata. Luckily for Houck, possible salvation has just arrived in the form of a legendary US soldier and newly convicted criminal, S.D. Plissken.
Call me Snake.
Yes, sir. I mean, Snake. Given his lengthy, varied, and acclaimed career, it seems hardly possible that there was a time when Kurt Russell was not a household name. Though prior to 1978, most people would have recognized him from his childhood spent appearing in commercials, or more likely, from a series of films he made for Disney during the early 1970s. That would begin to change when he was cast as Elvis Presley in a 1978 biographical TV movie called simply Elvis, which was directed by John Carpenter. An odd bit of coincidence, given that Kurt Russell's first theatrical appearance was in the 1962 Elvis Presley vehicle It Happened at the World's Fair. Equally odd was a 1969 film Elvis made with Mary Tyler Moore called Change of Habit, where he played a doctor named John Carpenter. Russell would play the king again some 16 years later, though in voice only, for Robert Zemeckis' Forrest Gump.
Oh, no, that's all right, man. I was just showing him a thing or two on the guitar here.
Production company Avco Embassy Films initially balked at the idea of a former Disney kid portraying a dystopian anti-hero, suggesting either Tommy Lee Jones or Charles Bronson should play the role of Snake Plissken. Thankfully, Carpenter stuck to his guns, given how wholly Russell inhabits the character. It would be a breakout role for him, and start a lifelong friendship that would also give us two other masterpieces of collaboration, The Thing and Big Trouble in Little China. Plissken is offered a full pardon for all crimes committed, in exchange for rescuing the president in under 24 hours, though he'll be completely alone within the prison.
Oh, you mean I can't count on you?
No.
Good.
Gotta love him. He enters the prison by piloting a glider, the only way to do so undetected. This sequence is extremely impressive given the scope and the budget with which they had to accomplish it. Even more extraordinary is an aspect that would be completely taken for granted these days. Did you notice it? The computer heads-up display in the glider's cockpit. Computer-generated imagery was in its infancy in 1981 and wildly expensive. The effects team's solution was ingenious. They built a scale model of the island of Manhattan and lined the building surfaces with reflective tape, effectively creating a practical computer model. Plissken finds himself wandering the streets of an urban hellscape, with St. Louis doubling for an abandoned New York. In 1976, a fire raged through the streets of St. Louis, rendering several blocks unlivable. The blaze threatened the entirety of the city itself. With reconstruction still decades away, it made for a perfect backdrop. The city's government gave the film crew full access, allowing them to turn off power for entire blocks of neighborhoods. Plissken finds himself beset on all sides with hostiles, ranging from street gangs to subterranean cannibals, but still finds time to take in a Broadway show. This is New York, after all. There he meets the first of a cadre of allies he'll encounter within the prison. Cabby seems less a prisoner and more a taxi driver who simply refused to leave his beloved cab and city. He's played by Academy Award winner Ernest Borgnine, no stranger to tales of action and mayhem, having previously played roles in The Dirty Dozen and Sam Peckinpah's landmark examination of men living in a world that's passed them by, The Wild Bunch. Given the multitude of threats within the prison, it'd be hard to give us a main antagonist, but boy do they. This is the Duke of New York, played by Black Moses himself, Isaac Hayes. But before we discuss him, let's talk for a minute about his right-hand man, Romero. Not only is he named after my favorite filmmaker, George A. Romero, but he's given one of the slowest and most deliberate reveals in cinema history, and is our first real introduction to the menace found inside the prison. He's played with bizarre intensity by a wildly underrated character actor, Frank Doubleday, a performer whom I'm convinced, had he made his debut during the 90s independent film boom, would be a huge star today. Years before, he starred as one of the leaders in a multiracial gang terrorizing the streets of Los Angeles in Carpenter's ode to Rio Bravo, Assault on Precinct 13, and is responsible for perhaps the most memorable moment in the entire film. He spent the better part of his career appearing on television, usually as a villain of the week, on shows like Chips, The Incredible Hulk, and T.J. Hooker, and is responsible for a new generation of actors, not only as an instructor at the Hollywood Court Theater, but as the father of two remarkable actresses, Caitlin Doubleday, seen here in Empire, and Portia Doubleday, one of the stars of Mr. Robot. Cabby leads Plissken to the New York Public Library, and the only two people who can lead him to the president, the Duke's advisor, Brain, a former criminal compatriot of Plissken's, and Brain Squeeze Maggie. Brain is played by veteran journeyman powerhouse Harry Dean Stanton. Here's all you need to know about him.
Hey, look at that. Look at those assholes over there. Ordinary fucking people. I hate them.
And Maggie by Adrienne Barbeau, who started her career on stage as the original Rizzo in Grease, and is one of the few actors at the time to escape the television ghetto and become a full-fledged movie star. Plissken's makeshift alliance with Brain proves his undoing, and finds himself in the hands of the Duke of New York. Keeping him tethered to Houck and the forces outside the prison is a tracer he wears on his wrist.
Tracer test confirmed at 20 hours, 17 minutes, 30 seconds.
That voice belongs to a woman who looms large in the early career of John Carpenter. This is Debra Hill. She began her association with Carpenter as the script supervisor and assistant editor for Assault on Precinct 13, but would go on to not only produce The Fog and Halloween, but co-author their screenplays. Incidentally, the hands of young Michael Myers at the beginning of the film, they belonged to her. Years later, she would produce films as diverse as Clue, Adventures in Babysitting, and Terry Gilliam's masterpiece, The Fisher King. She passed away in 2005, but her legacy behind the scenes for women, and for moviegoers in general, cannot be overestimated. With the countdown ticking relentlessly down, Brain and Maggie formulate a plan of their own, while Plissken is forced into gladiatorial combat. What follows is an exhilarating car chase across the 69th Street Bridge. No mean feat, given that it is covered in landmines. Escape from New York draws heavily on multiple genres: science fiction, action, western, even musical, but it transcends them. And for all its Watergate-inspired metaphor and clucking tongue about the state of America, it is in the end a story of momentum and hope, even if that hope is a good deed done in the wake of an incredibly cynical world. Carpenter will be remembered as a master horror filmmaker, but Escape from New York sees him at the height of his directorial power. He is an action filmmaker like none other, balancing dozens of disparate elements ultimately into a tale well told. His other films may be more successful financially, or an impact on popular culture, but this is the one his entire career can be measured against, and is one you should definitely see.
We'd make one hell of a team, Snake.
The name's Plissken.